Good morning, everyone. I am very, very pleased this morning to have Joan Peterson presenting to us. We have tried to have her do a forum for us every year that has to do with gun safety reform, which all of us, I think is long, long overdue. So today, Joan Peterson, for those of you who don't know, is the co-president of the Northland Brady Protect Minnesota chapter. And she's going to discuss new developments in the gun violence prevention area and what to expect in Minnesota's legislature and the Congress. She's going to provide updates regarding federal measures, including what President Biden's plans are for reducing gun crime. Thankfully, he has some. Joan is a victim and a survivor of gun violence. Her sister was murdered in a domestic shooting in 1992. And Joan, I know that whatever you present today, we will so much appreciate. So over to you.
Okay, hi everybody. I think I know most of you actually. So it's good to be here. Yeah, there's Jan, Gail, my friend Barb. So I am gonna do, this is an overwhelming topic and I put this together because I'm going to do another presentation at University for Seniors actually. So I've kind of got a generic presentation here and I'll slip over some things that are less important for this group because I think you are all pretty knowledgeable about this topic. But so, you know, here's the Second Amendment. And I've been talking to a man who contacted me through LinkedIn. He has this 21st century America vision of the Second Amendment. And he said, he thinks we ought to be talking about the Second Amendment for the 21st century. Obviously, it's very different when it was written than now. The weapons that we have now were not anywhere envisioned when the founding fathers wrote the Second Amendment. And so, you know, what do these words actually mean? We all know that the pro-gun folks take the shall not be infringed part of the Second Amendment. That's their thing. They don't usually highlight the well-regulated militia. And it's not unlimited. We know that Justice Scalia decided in the Heller decision in 2008 Supreme Court that there are places where people should not have guns, some people shouldn't have guns, and the types of guns they can have and carry should be allowed to be regulated. So this is a Protect Minnesota thing. It's not unlimited. I looked up your own position on gun violence prevention, like my church, which is the UCC, and I think that the Episcopalian Church, those are the three I think that have the strongest gun violence prevention mission statements and policy statements. And so that has allowed us as my church, Peace Church, and your church to act, to do the things that you've done to help sponsor forums and vigils and speak out on behalf of your own church. And we have long thought that faith communities are a good place for people to get involved, because what's a better place for us to be involved than nonviolence, right, and social justice. So you do have a position that allows you to do that, and you have spoken out. So the current situation, nothing is happening. As you probably know, one thing happened in the Rescue Act, the CARES Act, is that there has been money set aside for community anti-violence programs. So that was one thing that was a good, I think that's something we have to do. We all know that urban gun violence is really awful right now. And we don't see it so much here in Duluth, but Minneapolis and St. Paul have had a really high uptick incidence of violence. And so to be able to start anti-violence programs in urban areas is really important. The House passed two bills in 2018, the background check bill and the Charleston loophole. And that was the bill that allowed the Charleston shooter to get a gun in spite of the fact that he was a prohibited purchaser, but there's a 3-day period after which, if the ATF hasn't said you're a prohibited purchaser, you can go ahead and get a gun. And he did. And I believe the federal government, or no, I believe the federal government has compensated the Charleston victims of that shooting because it should have not happened. The same with Minnesota legislation. Some of you on this call went on the bus, one of the last things we did before the COVID shutdown, to Hibbing, to what I would say in air quotes, a hearing that the Senate Judiciary Committee held in Hibbing, which was one of the worst hearings I've ever attended. There were people with guns, people shouted down the speakers. It was awful. It was traumatic, actually, for some of the speakers. It was a terrible, terrible hearing, but we don't see any bills coming forward that would be background checks or anything that would benefit us. What we do see is an attempt to probably bring forward stand your ground and permitless carry, which would allow anybody to carry a gun with no training, no permit, no anything. But we know it won't go anywhere because we have the House and we have Governor Walz. But that doesn't mean they won't try. And so that's what we expect to happen in the legislature this year. I don't see us going by bus to the Capitol, to be lobbying for bills that we want. So it's a sad situation. And then we all know what happened on January 6th and the insurrectionism and the stockpiling of weapons and ammunition that many people have been doing for years. And those of us in this movement have been watching it, thinking it's coming, and it came. But the only thing that saved the situation from maybe being worse is that Washington, D.C. has such strict laws about carrying guns. The insurrectionists knew that they couldn't carry guns, although a few have, and have been charged with carrying a weapon. But had Washington, D.C. not had such a strict laws preventing carrying of guns, I think we could have seen a different scenario. And they continue, as we know. This is a little small, but so 32% of Americans say they own a firearm. And that means, 32 people. That doesn't include families. So we're seeing about 41% of all Americans, which is an uptick, 44% of households. That's gone up. During the pandemic, there was an increase in the purchase of guns and background checks. And so we have, you can see, privately owned firearms. We own in America most of the guns in the world. And we have like 3% of Americans they call super owners have an average of 17 guns each. Those are probably some of the people we saw on January 6th, some of the extremists. They own a lot of guns. They don't just own one or two. And that's a problem. And that's new. You might have seen that the Sandy Hook parents won a court case, Remington Arms, because they found a loophole sort of in that Remington Arms was advertising their assault rifles to children. And the shooter of Sandy Hook was a young man who shouldn't have had a gun. So a lot of people see that as something that was a breakthrough or sort of a message. If you're going to advertise to kids, advertise assault rifles, you better watch out because there will be a consequence. And so this could be a change, just like I think the Parkland shooting was a change in our movement because we had young kids, teenagers speaking out and saying, we call BS. And that the Sandy Hook victims obviously couldn't do that. So several things have kind of changed the sort of the atmosphere. And there is something called PLACA that we'd like to get rid of, Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms, which is essentially a gun industry immunity bill so that they cannot be sued. But there have been things like this recent case with Remington Arms that have poked holes in placas. So we're hoping that means there will be other holes. So that, yeah, as it said, they've managed to invoke the immunity, but I think in this case, there was a way around it, and that was good news. This is the gun that was used at Sandy Hook. That's the type of rifle. And Brady has put together this little graphic. Though assault rifle type shootings don't account for the majority of our shootings in this country, more people, as we know, are shot in one incident. 155% more people when there's an assault rifle and high capacity magazines, which is why we have been again calling for a ban on assault rifles. But whenever you use the word ban, the ire of the gun lobby becomes loud. Senator John Marty has a bill 3377, 3378. If you look at this, which I don't know if you can see all of it, this is like one comprehensive bill that has virtually everything in it. Everything that we might want is in this bill. It was bold of him to do it. He knows it's not going to go anywhere, but I think for him, this was a statement that these are all the things that we need to see if we are to prevent shootings. Whenever Gail Schoenfelder knows this, who's on the call, licensing and registration, whenever you mention that word, it prompts a huge outcry. It wouldn't mean anything to anybody's rights to own a gun, but they seem to think that if there was a register, that the government would come after their guns, which is just a total nonsensical idea. But they've kind of won the messaging war when it comes to that, which is most annoying and irritating. And I hope that we can take that back by talking truth. So I love that he put this together. I love that he made a statement, but we know it won't go anywhere. Ghost guns, he mentions. Ghost guns that's a new thing. They are kits sold online. So you can put together your own gun. You can make your own gun, add a few parts, no serial numbers, no regulation. They cannot be traced. They are beginning to be used in crimes and shootings. It's been discovered that ghost guns are used. So they are designed to avoid laws. When people can sit at home and make their own guns, there also are guns that can be made on 3D printers, which is another scary thing. And those too avoid laws, no background check, no way to trace them. So we have technology has made it easier for people to slip through the cracks who shouldn't have guns. And here's a kit of what you can purchase online to make your own gun at home. And this is what the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, I got on their website, this is what they think about what John Marty has done, anti-gun screed. And this is their website. Stop all gun control. We don't stand idly by when your Second Amendment rights are being infringed. We'll never compromise. That's part of the problem. They will never compromise. So what we have to do is elect people who will. I think that's the only way around this, because we know they won't compromise. Okay, so just for the sake of messaging, I think it's important for us to look at how other things that we purchase in our society are regulated. So we know about cars. You have to have a permit before you can get a license. And then you have a license and it's renewable every 4 years, and you have to register your car. And there's liability insurance and safety standards. We have seat belts and airbags. With guns, of course, none of that exists. And so there is an effort. There's a city in California, I'm trying to recall, that passed a law that you had to have insurance if you own a gun. Some people think that would be a really good way to get to change the landscape a little bit. If you have to have insurance, you have to prove that you're going to be safe. And if insurance companies have to pay out if you shoot somebody, that would make a difference. So there are some workarounds to the traditional laws that just we can't seem to pass, and new thoughts about how to do that. And so I've been thinking about this. You know, they always say, well, the criminals won't abide by the law anyway. I think most people do. And my friend Brent Gertek, in one of the presentations he gave, he's a gun owner, he likened it to this little example. If you are on a country road and there's a 4-way stop sign, even if there aren't any cars around, most people, when they see a stop sign, stop. And so it's a ridiculous notion that people won't abide by the law, because most people do. And if they don't, there are consequences. So if you don't abide by the speeding law, you get picked up. And if you do it too many times, your license is taken away. So that's another one of the messaging things that they've managed to win that we need to take back. People do abide by the laws, and we're a nation where the rule of law exists, and we can't have a lawless society. It's nonsense to think that gun owners shouldn't follow any laws. And felons have tried to follow the law. They've tried to purchase guns, and since the Brady bill was enacted in 1993, 4 million prohibited purchasers have been stopped from buying a gun. So we know that some felons, domestic abusers, sex offenders, and others have tried, actually. They've tried to get guns from licensed dealers, and they were prevented. And the problem is that there are too many private sellers online or at gun shows where these people can go. If they're stopped there, they have a place to go to get a gun. One example that we like to talk about is that if you were traveling and 1 in 5 people didn't have to go through the TSA pre-check, how would that be? You know, let 1 in 5 go through without them looking at your luggage or, you know, x-raying what's inside. It's a crazy notion, and we have to change how we talk about it. So I think I've talked about this before. There's a site called armslist.com. You can get on this site and you can specifically put in your city or your state, and you can find guns for sale in your area online. And these are not the kind of sales that happen if you went online for Fleet Farm. For example, if you bought a gun online at Fleet Farm, you would have to go to a licensed dealer to pick it up and go through the background check. This is just private sellers, private buyers who get together online and find a place to transfer the weapon for money. Could be, you know, on a street corner or wherever you decide, parking lot. I had an interesting conversation with Representative Stauber about this. He had no idea that this existed. For a man who's got such a strong NRA position and says the things he says, he doesn't know about this. And many of our, I think, elected leaders don't know that this exists. This is an easy way for people to get guns without a background check. And here, for example, is one of the guns that's available in the Duluth area. And it says private party right there. And he has a number of other, some of them are hunting guns, some are small pistols. We know that hunting guns can also be used to shoot somebody. Certainly pistols can. This one has a scope on it. I'm not that familiar with what this particular Remington. But these are guns that are available in the Duluth area. And I see Sally's dog has joined us. And then, speaking of dogs, I looked into how easy it is to get a gun as opposed to adopting a pet, because somebody told me they had to go through this extensive process to adopt a rescue dog or a pet. So they look into whether your environment, your home environment is safe. I think you might even have to have a background check. And it takes a couple days to longer. You can't just get a pet immediately. They look into a bunch of stuff. So it really is easier to get a gun than it is to do a whole lot of other things. And adopting a pet is just one of them. Then this is something that just is bothering me. I almost wrote a letter to the editor, but didn't get around to it. There's often no message of mention of where the gun comes from. Nobody's talking about, okay, here's this case that you probably saw an article recently in the Duluth News Tribune. Iron Range teen pleads guilty to shooting her mother. She's a 16-year-old. No mention of where that gun came from. I don't know if they have some sort of prohibition on mentioning it, but one of the things that some of us like to say is every gun in the hands of a child must first pass through the hands of an adult. Kids cannot buy guns, and they can't get them unless an adult provides them in some way. Either they steal it from home. 70% of guns used in school shootings come from home. Most school shooters are teenagers or kids that go to the school. People are not safely storing their guns, which is another area that we've been working hard on. And then Brett and I were talking before you all came on about this epidemic. We have a gun violence epidemic. It's a public health issue. We need to look at it through the lens of public health. And so working with the medical community is another way in which we hope we can get people to hear the message. But then there was a lawsuit in Florida called Docs versus Glocks, where doctors were prohibited from asking if there might be a loaded, unsecured gun in your home. And the gun lobby thought that was an intrusion of their privacy. So that lawsuit went back and forth, and now they were going to charge doctors something like $5,000 fine if they even mentioned it to the parent of small kids. In the end, the gun lobby lost that one. So there's been an increase, I've read many articles recently, an increase in suicides, especially among teens, especially among young teens of color and in the Native American community. There are more firearms. People purchased more firearms during the pandemic. I don't know if they thought guns were going to protect them from the virus or if they thought it was going to be Armageddon or what, but more people purchase guns. And as more people have purchased guns, we've seen the numbers creep back up of gun deaths and injuries. When my sister was shot in 1992, it was about 40-some thousand Americans a year who died of gun violence, and then it went down. It ticked down to about 30,000. Some of us think that had to do with the Brady law passing. The gun lobby will say it has to do with the fact that they were able to carry their guns around in public, and there's no evidence, of course, that carrying guns in public has resulted in fewer gun deaths. In fact, it's resulted in more, but that's another soapbox that I'd like to stand on. But so the Gun Violence Archive is a great site, and the Trace is another great site if you want information. The Trace is an online journal of sorts. They write every day about gun violence issues. And so about 5% of adults in America purchased a gun for the first time. Many people who don't know much about guns, but in a panic, they're first-time gun buyers. Do they understand their responsibility with those guns? Do they understand that if they don't lock them up securely, a little kid will find a gun? There's been an increase in that number. A teenager having a bad day might find a gun, or it could be stolen. And the bad news for us is, according to one study, when more people have bought guns, that they're changing their mind about gun laws, and they're not as informed, I don't think, about what gun laws are, and so they don't think that we have to change our gun laws. And this is not good news for the movement that I'm in. And, okay, so I wanted to show you the Gun Violence Archive keeps track of every incident of shooting. It's a really good site. It started as some people who are volunteers, but now it's the place to go. Oops, I thought I had that. I did have it. Somehow that disappeared. There's something like 9,000 homicides as of this date. It's about 200 teens, 11 to 17, who've been shot so far this year, and it's not even April yet. So they keep track, and they keep track of suicides. It was hard for them to do it at the beginning. They also keep track of this one right here, defensive gun use. The gun lobby will tell you that people use their guns millions of times a year to defend themselves, and that is just a lie. They don't. If they did, we'd be hearing about it. I'm sorry this one didn't get on there somehow. This is what's happening in Minnesota. And those of you who've been involved from the beginning know that we used to say it would be one Minnesotan a day that was shot and killed by suicide, by unintentional shooting or homicide. Now we have 470 deaths as of 2019, so that's gone up. You can see most are male, most are suicides. At least 70% are suicides. And most of the suicides, as you can see, Duluth had in 2019 a total of 10 gun deaths. 9 of those were suicide. So we are seeing older white men in rural areas using guns to commit suicide. And that message, I don't know why we can't get that out, because a lot of gun owners live in rural areas. They just don't see that it could be a risk to themselves personally if they have a bad moment. Farmers, for one thing, there have been a lot of farmers who used a gun in suicide, and that doesn't make the news. Those are not like high profile shootings. So we managed, between Moms Demand Action and Protect Minnesota, we worked with the school district and school board members to get the school district to send home a letter to parents at the end of the school year with information about safe storage. Minnesota has a CAP law, Child Access Prevention Law, and so parents can be held responsible if a child finds a gun and shoots themselves or somebody else, but it's not often enforced, because if it's their own child, we know that the terrible grief and the guilt. So unfortunately, it's not enforced like it should be. But the school district has been pretty good. They sent something home this year before the winter break as well. Moms Demand Action has a program called Be Smart for Kids. Brady has one called asking if there's an unlocked loaded gun in the homes where your children play. End Family Fire is a Brady initiative that is family fire being anything that happens in the home. When there's a crisis, we know that firearms are the deadliest and the most efficient way, if you're going to use it, to kill yourself. Veteran suicides are very high. And if you use a gun, it's less likely that you will survive, but people who try to commit suicide in other ways can survive, and they often don't make another attempt. Let's see. This, if you're interested, Brady has a wonderful podcast. It's called Red, Blue, and Brady. I was interviewed for it when it first began. They have people from all over the country in various involved in various issues, legal people. This one happens to be gun traffickers and how guns make it into the hands of the young kids in our urban neighborhoods, often by straw purchases, which is buying a gun for somebody else who can't. That's illegal, and we need to make sure gun owners are much more aware that if two people come into a gun shop and one of them is looking at a gun and the other is saying, yeah, that looks like a good gun, and one fills out the form for the background check and then walks out of the store and gives the gun to the other person, it's a straw purchase and it's illegal. But that is in one way that guns make it to the illegal market. Stolen guns is another way. And this Protect Minnesota now has a podcast, 52 Reasons Why, which is a pretty good podcast, interviewing people about various issues. I think it's a good podcast. Oh, this is the stand your ground. I think a lot of you know that this would be being able to shoot somebody and not being held responsible for it legally. And it often affects people of color more. Black people are more often prosecuted than white people. I have, now see, I don't know if I can play some, oh, here, I'm gonna play a video. This one was made a long time ago.
Joan, I don't hear sound.
But can't you hear it? I wasn't sure if you'd be able to hear it. Sorry. So you can't hear that?
I can't. Let's
Can
see here.
anybody hear that? I wasn't sure how that would work here.
Hold on here.
Oh, can anybody else hear that?
Can you let us know if you are able to hear this, please? Anybody? It doesn't, I don't see any nodding here.
Okay, so you can't hear the sound.
Nope, can't hear.
Okay, never mind. Let's not play that. There's some really good videos here that I wanted to show you. No, you can't hear this. Okay, this one is a really good, particularly good one. This one is about a man. It's the Ed video. He walks into a business with a gun and walks right past the people at the front desks, and they're shouting and yelling, and he comes up to the people in the back and he actually shoots his gun, but it turns out it's an old I'm not sure even what you call them, a weapon that is filled with gunpowder. So he shoots once, it doesn't go anywhere, people run, and then he has to stop and take the long stick and reload his gun. And so the end of it is gun laws have changed and guns have changed, or guns have changed, why shouldn't gun laws change? Some of these are really good videos. Sorry, you can't hear them. So before we go to questions, I mean, there certainly are lots of things we can do. The fact that you're on this forum means that you're interested. Join groups, attend events. If there is a time when we need people to write postcards or make phone calls, it's really good to be on the email lists of Brady, of Protect Minnesota, or whatever organization. We do have the Northland chapter has a Facebook page, which I'm the owner of, so I post on there. So if you want to join Northland Protect Minnesota, Brady have Facebook pages, they're tweeting, they have Instagram pages. So if you're on any of those forums, you should follow them, because that's where you learn a lot. Tweeting especially is a place where you can learn a lot about what's going on. Brady tweets at Brady Buzz, and Protect Minnesota is Protect MN. There is an Interfaith Alliance for Gun Safety for Protect Minnesota that clergy can join, and then you get information and can be involved in discussions about the issue. And then there's a lot of new research happening. Brady has happened to do a report of the role that gun stores make in easier access to guns. So this is some new research. They gained access to ATF records with a Freedom of Information Act request, and found out that many gun stores are not following the mandates that the ATF has left with them if they violated the rules. And you can click on, I can click on around here, Minnesota, you can see that there are many gun owners not following the rules, and that means guns are getting into the hands of people who shouldn't have them. One of the problems we have is that the ATF is vastly underfunded and understaffed. They're supposed to be doing inspections once a year, but they're not getting around to that. And because of the fierce opposition of the gun lobby, the ATF doesn't have a permanent director. There was an attempt recently to appoint a director of the ATF, David, why am I blocking on his name now? He worked for Giffords. He was a former ATF director, and he worked for ATF. He worked for the ATF. He was not able to be appointed because of such opposition to his position, because he had worked for Giffords, the Giffords organization. So we don't have a director of the ATF. We haven't had a permanent director for the ATF for many years. And that's a problem, because we need that organization to be vital. Yeah, you can see here, but what at? 130,525 active federal firearms licenses, and there were only 5,827 compliance inspections in the year 2020. So many of them could be dealing in, unsafe practices, but we wouldn't know it. And then a gun that falls into the hands of somebody who shouldn't have it gets used in a crime. And the one last thing is, we have approached Representative Stauber about this one, Ethan's Law. Kristen and Mike Song's son, Ethan, went to visit a friend, and the kids were playing with a gun they found, and the gun went off and Ethan was shot and killed. And they are working to pass a federal safe storage law called Ethan's Law, and they wanted a Republican. So we got involved in asking people to make phone calls to Representative Stauber's office, and then Sarah Mikesell from Moms Demand Action got on the phone and got Chief Mike Tuskin with her to talk to one of his aides in Washington, D.C. about the importance of this. I don't know that he signed on, I don't think he has, but I do think that this could be an election issue, because if gun owners can't even sign on to a law that requires safe storage of guns, why? We need to ask why. What would be the objection to that? I mean, there would be consequences if a gun is used. $500 penalty for each firearm kept unsecured. There could possibly be jail time. But if a life is taken because of a gun that you have not secured safely, there should be a consequence. So some of these are things that could be asked in forums, questions that we could ask.